Super. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take you through personally my own journey working and being in an incubation space from the very, very beginning. The reason that I'm going to do this in the context of each of the three themes that we're going to talk about today is I just want to tell you, given the fact that this is coming from a place where the incubation centres in the Northwest want to share with you ways in which you can scale, think globally, and at the same time to work globally or to work locally. From that point of view, I wanted to start off today by telling you a little bit about my story. Now, I lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks I lasted working from home back in September 2010 when I set up Hayes Cullerton first. And I have to say, I remember at the time thinking that almost the four walls around me were going to close in on top of me. Now, obviously, this is long before COVID. This is long before lockdown. And I had left a small business at the time to go and pursue the entrepreneurial journey that I had always wanted to do. And I remember I remember one day going out to the library out in DCU. And I remember the distance of the commute. At the time, the commute was about 20 minutes. And I just remember thinking, God, isn't this just absolutely lovely? The fact that I can go somewhere, have a dedicated space and come home. Now, when we started off first, I certainly didn't have the money to be investing in fancy dancy offices and the glass corner office for myself or anything else like that. So back then, at the time, what I really needed was the space to put a bit of distance between me and the work that I was doing at the time. And then from then on, it's interesting. So we joined Invent DCU on the 1st of October 2010. So I went into an incubation center looking for that distance, as I say, the physical location. But what happened over the years from there then is that, first of all, I was now in an ecosystem. So now I was able to get access to, for example, I was on the newsletter for the centre, which meant I found out about, for example, New Frontiers. Now, back then, I sound like I'm ancient, but I'm not really. Back then, it was the Enterprise Platform Programme, for example, and we applied for that and we joined it and we were approved for it. That was a connection between DKIT and DCU. Also, I applied and was accepted onto the Plato programme. I applied for numerous Enterprise Ireland and Leo events and awards and so on like that. But it was basically, it felt like that the centre was keeping their eye on the ball for me and for my growing progressively over the years team. And then after that, it also then became about, from time to time, simply having, once a year, once a 6-month check-in with the office manager to say, here's where we're at the moment, here's what's changing, here's a new product we're developing, here's a new service we're offering, whatever it might be. And just to say, just putting it out there. And often those meetings turned into, now who you should meet, Susan, is such and such person. Or we're actually holding an event here in a couple of weeks' time. Why don't you run your market research as 10 minutes of that? It also turned into, we have a resident expert who could talk to you about that. Or it evolved into other ways. But it basically, by being part of an incubation centre, it just instantly increased the network that I had, but also staff that work in an incubation centre as well. Their task is to cultivate the network for their clients and so on. And then I'm just going to bring the story to its nth degree, because I have to tell you the best thing of all that we took out of being an incubation centre as part of a university as it was in DCU, and you'll hear in a moment why I'm using the past tense, is the best thing of all is that we then applied for an innovation voucher. Now, they are fantastic. They're fantastic value. And they can really deliver an awful lot for you. And it definitely gives you a relationship with a university if you can make it successful. We applied for an innovation voucher in DCU, which then led on to an innovation partnership, which then led on to a second innovation partnership, which I can, hand on heart, tell you that was the thing that gave us our USP, particularly through COVID, was the work that we had done within the innovation partnership. Now, since then, DCU, the centre where we were, they're now repurposing it in the interest of social distance and so on. So just in the past month, we've now moved to TU Dublin, the campus in Grangegorman, where I'm joining you from today. So the reason that I wanted to start off with this is just to tell you that bear in mind who we have with us today. We have Sligo IT, we have GMIT, we have LY, Letterkenny IT, and they want to truly get the message across to you to say that, yes, you can absolutely facilitate remote working through an incubation centre. If you want to have a global mindset, you absolutely can do that. It starts off with mindset. Obviously, you need mentors and you need money. We're going to talk about all three of those today. But it is certainly very important that you know that an incubation centre can really give you the element of doing that. And as regards working locally, I mean, the people that you're talking to have absolutely got boots on the ground, but they have got networks globally. So it's bringing all of those three elements together that we're going to do. Just as you've seen there, I see that the first message has come in there on the chat from Maria. So Maria is joining us from GMIT, is to please interact with us on CUAConf. Okay, that is the Twitter hashtag. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that as well over here on my right hand side. So through the chat, through the Q&A, and through the Twitter hashtag, that is what we will invite you to interact on. Now, in order to open this conversation formally, I'm now going to welcome Dr. Chris O'Malley. Can I ask you, please, Dr. Chris, can I ask you to turn on your camera? Super. And now, can you formally, please, bring this conference to an open?
Thanks so much, Susan, and thank you for facilitating the event. And clearly, there's a lot of interest from business. This is a time of huge new challenges, but also, I think, opportunities. And with the pandemic, and indeed the requirement for the great majority of the workforce to work from home over most of the past 15 months, it's forced us all to radically rethink how we go about our daily business. For example, with the three institutes of the Connacht Ulster Alliance, we've had to rapidly change the way we both deliver our teaching courses and assess our students. Certainly a roller coaster, but at least we all kept the show on the road. And other organizations have had to do the same in their own sectors. In some ways, working virtually has made things easier. For example, when I wanted to speak to a CEO in Dundalk, we could organize it the following day because it was online, whereas beforehand, I would have had to find a day in my diary which it would have taken to drive to Dundalk and back to Sligo. So, of course, we will go back to face-to-face meetings, but not all the time. For example, when we organised working group meetings of the Connacht Ulster Alliance with Sligo, Galway Mayo and Letterkenny, we used to dedicate a full day to each meeting because that allowed the time to travel to and from the events. Now we only need 2 hours because they're online. And it's not just a question of online meetings. For example, with the help of technologies like augmented reality or emulation software, it becomes possible, for example, for a manufacturer to provide after-sales service to a customer in a different part of the world. And these technologies can also make it possible to collaborate with the supplier in the design of a new product or part from a different location. But while working online does remove some of the disadvantages of remoteness and barriers to working at a distance, at the same time, it can have also have the impact of destabilizing structures that we've taken for granted. For example, Facebook has just announced that it's allowing its employees in its Irish subsidiary to work from anywhere in the world. And that decision might, in the words of one employment solicitor, open the floodgates to large parts of the activity of multinationals in this country invisibly move out of it. So in this world of greater fluidity, it's all the more important that we have a clear view of what it is that holds us together. We do know that for all the advantages of working in an online world, there are limitations too. For us in higher education, one of the big disadvantages of working off-site has been the impact on the student experience, with the isolation that having to study from home brings. And while we have by and large managed to keep collaboration going, for people joining new teams especially, it's hard to build the same dynamic purely through online meetings. Creative thinking may begin to suffer when teams stop getting together in the same place. So that's why we all would still need to see our staff moving back on campus in bigger numbers as the vaccination campaign and its effect ramps up. So the question for all of us will be how best to strike the new balance between remoteness and physical presence. And I believe overall, we should see the post-pandemic near future as an opportunity for the northwest of Ireland. We're in a region marked by a sparsely distributed population, and if we can take the lead in finding ways to work successfully in managing remoteness, we can turn that to our advantage. For example, we in IT Sligo are national leaders in online higher education because we had to respond to that challenge of remoteness. And there are other ways where we could look at taking a lead, whether, for example, in the management of tighter collaboration in supply chains, and we have a centre which is focusing on that, that's just getting started now, or the distance delivery of more of our health services, for example. These are areas where we should be looking to take a lead. We could also look at the opportunities that are being opened up by the Atlantic Economic Corridor and Western Development Commission project to connect up all the enterprise hubs across the region to provide first-class infrastructure for SMEs and remote working. And against this backdrop, another important opportunity for the region is that we in the Connacht Ulster Alliance of Sligo, Galway, Mayo and Letterkenny are proceeding on our journey to become a united technological university. The international panel to evaluate our application is coming next month, and if all goes well, we will be a university early next year. And it's become clear that we need the university title to more effectively attract students, staff and partners from around the world. In particular, we need to change the pattern whereby more than half of the school leavers from this region pursue higher education outside of it. That is a brain drain that we have to reverse if the region is going to prosper to its fullest potential. So can I thank Susan Hayes-Culleton for facilitating today, and add my thanks to guest speaker Caroline Reedy and to panelists Elaine Murphy, David Gilday, Louise Foodie and Paul McBride. And I'd also like to thank Jeanette Gillen from IT Sligo, Patsy Donaghy from Letterkenny IT, Maria Staunton from GMIT and Turlock Rafferty from the iHub in Galway for organising this webinar series. And many thanks for listening, and I wish everyone the best in participating in this very important discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Chris. And I think it is very important that we consider all of these new working ways so that we can maximise, as you say, the opportunities for all, particularly in the context of how we can all work together and combine our resources to have a greater and greater vision. So we thank you very much indeed for your contribution. So already I've started to see that I see some conversation there on Twitter. Hello, Liam. Liam has just been tweeting there about how we're up and running. Also, we see people from the Empower group. They have started to tweet as well at CUAConf. That is the hashtag CUAConf. And then I also see New Frontiers and Northwest has also been tweeting as well. So please do keep them coming. Now, it gives me really great pleasure to welcome Caroline Reedy to your screen. I'm not going to say a whole lot about Caroline because I'm going to give her the maximum amount of time possible. But what I really do encourage you to do is to send in your questions in through the Q&A pod so that then I can put your questions to her. Caroline is going to speak to you for about 20 to 25 minutes about the new realities of remote working. And most of all, she's going to talk about attracting talent, retaining talent, as well as the unintended consequences that some of you may find. Specifically, Caroline is the CEO of the HR Suite based in Kerry. Many of you will have seen and heard her on News Talk, on RTE, etc. And she's also the author of The Art of Asking the Right Questions, which we will pick up on all of the above afterwards. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Susan, and I'm delighted to be with you all today. And I suppose this is probably one of the most topical areas, and it's going to be a really big game changer for businesses that are going to really embrace the opportunity that all of the new hybrid opportunities and challenges, as Chris rightly said at the start, but I think embracing them and putting a really good strategy in place around them will make a really big difference. As Susan said, I'm working in HR for 25 plus years at this stage. I run a business called the HR Suite, so I know the huge benefit of being involved in growing a global business from a fabulous part of Ireland in Kerry on the Wild Atlantic Way, and still having fantastic talent by embracing hybrid and remote working. I've also written 2 books, as Susan mentioned. I adjudicate for the WRC, and I suppose this is an area I'm very passionate about. That's our contact details. We'd love you to connect with us if this is a space that you're interested in. So to start, I suppose, in looking at the backdrop of where we're coming from, the brilliant opportunities and challenges that Chris alluded to in his opening is that we have an increased talent pool now. You can absolutely work from anywhere once you have amazing broadband. That is the only prerequisite now to where people can be based. And that's a very exciting prospect for a lot of businesses in terms of particularly those who have had a challenge in terms of attracting talent, especially in key skills like IT, etc., that we have a limited talent pool in Ireland for. I suppose travel restrictions and quarantine are easing, which is really positive. So we're going to see a lot more people who are interested in working for Irish companies that have a global focus and that are in that growth stage. Talent is in demand, however, so we need to think about how are we going to make our business and our solution to the job opportunity somebody may be looking for, how are we going to make that stand out? And ultimately, one of the key areas to do that is there's a huge reluctance for people to return to full-time work without flexibility of either a blend of remote working or a blend of different types of hours. And that's one huge injection the pandemic fast-tracked for us in terms of that ability now to facilitate people to work remotely or work in that hybrid model. And key for all of us is to identify why you over another employer. And I'm going to give you some ideas in my presentation, as you'll hear, I'm sure, from the other speakers this morning. But I think that's a really good takeaway if you try and focus on what's your USP as to why somebody should come and either remain working from you as part of your retention strategy, or why should they come work for you as part of your attraction strategy. So I suppose at the early stages of a business, or indeed as your business grows, the importance of jumping into the helicopter and strategically assessing what does your business need at all stages of growth is crucially important. And the confidence in growing your team and, you know, recruiting people who are better than what you have already so that you're driving your business onto a whole new level is crucial to achieving your business goals and the business vision and success that you have for your business. Equally, we have to look at what is your succession plan. So oftentimes a business starts with some key founders, and as the business grows, the importance of developing a succession plan is key to facilitate key specialists to be employed and recruited into key areas to drive the business forward. Also, hiring for future growth is something that strategically we need to focus on, because it takes quite a while to get somebody on board and settled into the company to start adding real value for you. So hiring early for that future growth and planning for that is really important. We spoke about the importance of retention and attraction strategies. And to me, you can't have one without the other. So it's really important that you identify who are your amazing people on your team and how are you going to retain those amazing people and how are you going to attract new people. And that great broadband is now the key essential ingredient that underpins that strategy, because if we have amazing broadband, well, then we can recruit people from absolutely anywhere and make this work really, really well. So I'm going to maybe reflect on what do people now want in a role when they're looking. And again, the pandemic has fast-tracked people's view of what's possible, and both employees and employers are now embracing a very different view to what a role may look like. I suppose attraction strategy and focusing on a career path is still really important. People want to know that if they join your organization, that they can grow with it and they can see a career path in relation to that organization. And that's particularly exciting if you're a startup, because they get to grow with the company. If you're a business that's growing at a later stage, again, hugely exciting to be part of that journey of growth. So they want an exciting company, a job with meaning and a job with scope. The micromanagement is long gone. People want that opportunity to have a job that they're really adding value. They're really making a difference to that company strategy. And that's really important that we embrace that so that we're taking advantage of that. In terms of career progression, knowing that I can progress my career, whether that's by enhanced educational opportunities, enhanced responsibilities, etc., is really important. And again, having a focus on that as part of our plan. Trainee manager programs, we're now working really collaboratively as organizations with colleges, institutes, universities, etc., to take people in early because they've got fantastic core skills and developing their skills further. And that's a really good opportunity. What incentive programs could you potentially look at to incentivize people based on the contribution that they're making to the company? And that to me is a win-win for both the company and for the person. Looking at benefits packages creatively and differently, again with meaning. Training and development is key. That lifelong learning and that learning opportunity, both experiential learning, that of getting mentored, body systems, and further education. There's fabulous opportunities now for further education with all of our universities and colleges and providers throughout the country. I suppose flexible hours and remote or hybrid options is a must now. And embracing what that looks like for your organization is different for all, but a necessity for all equally. And people are now looking at potentially working shorter weeks, so like a 4-day week and doing their full week. They're looking at options of remote working. So again, you might be working remotely. We've seen, as Chris mentioned, Facebook, and I incorporated the Facebook piece into my presentation simply because that's probably taking the whole work anywhere in the world example to the extreme opportunity. For most, they look at the tax opportunity that you can be away for 183 days, and they're giving people the opportunity, for example, to work from anywhere for up to 3 months. But then they're looking at hybrid options as well, which is that you work in the office maybe 2 days a week, you work from home 3 days a week. Again, giving people lots of flexibility and opportunities around work-life balance, which is the number one priority for a lot of people now. Once they get paid fairly, work-life balance in terms of flexibility is the number two after that. So it just shows us how important it is as a result of that. So this is just to give you an opportunity of thinking outside the box in relation to benefits and rewards, again, to help you stand out in terms of your retention and your attraction policy. So pension, as we know, is coming on the tracks anyway, but helping people with pension, paid sick leave, again, we've statutory sick leave starting from next year, educational support, flexi time or seasonal employment. And I'm not going to go through all the other opportunities here, but we see now that people getting sabbaticals, paid mental health days, employee assistance, etc. People want something now that's a little bit different and also focused at their well-being, their growth, their development, and their work-life balance. And again, when you're thinking of your rewards and benefit strategy, both from a retention and an attraction perspective, think about it under those key themes. I suppose attraction of talent, to me, is one of the key elements of that employer branding journey that you start as part of that attraction strategy. And hiring, to me, is probably one of the most important jobs that you do as a business leader. And hiring the right talent accelerates your business and brings you to a whole new place. Hiring problems does exactly the opposite. So we say hire slow and carefully and strategically, and fire fast but legally if you get it wrong. So I suppose think about, the culture fit, think about the competencies that are crucial to your business, and think about the outcomes that you want that person to deliver as you go through the selection process. And our recruitment piece in terms of where to recruit from, start your journey early. So if you, for example, have growth planned, recruit earlier than you think you need to, so that you do it slow, thoroughly, and really get the best people as a result. I suppose recruit virtually now. I mean, think about where your talent pool will see your jobs, and virtual recruitment is hugely successful and working really, really well. And think about what's your best, advertising window, depending on the profile of staff that you're specifically looking for. Video interviewing is, I suppose, a brilliant opportunity and a brilliant tool, but it requires more effort because you need to prepare even more to ensure that you really get a thorough experience with the employee rather than the face-to-face interview. I suppose employer branding in your recruitment advert is key. And there's no better way than using current staff in videos or testimonials for people to see what's it really like to work here, and giving examples of people who are working and able to go surfing after they finish work, people who see career progression opportunities, people who can give you a story of how meaningful their job is and how they've progressed in the role, are really powerful tools now. Think about the interviewee experience. I mean, we need them to get a really thorough opportunity to assess their skills, but we need to think about more than just an interview. For many jobs, we use occupational personality assessments. I'm a huge believer again, in recruiting the best candidates. I think that's a brilliant tool to help us in terms of recruiting the best staff. So again, an opportunity to look at. Shorten the recruitment process in terms of once people apply and you have your cutoff, maybe do a short screening, a video interview, and your OPQs, for example, and shorten the process as much as you can to make it an experience that this person is going to stick with. We're definitely finding that if they have to go through 3 interviews, many of them have been snapped up by the time they get to the 3rd interview. So again, think about that. Build relationships with your colleges, your universities, etc. And we've seen there from Chris how open they are to helping and trying to foster those relationships as best we can. And taking on co-op students, summer work placements, etc., is a brilliant way to assess fit and, you know, really get that opportunity to identify, because for most of the time, hiring for attitude and training for skill is the key ingredient to getting a successful person on board, because everybody's going to have the same qualification or skills before they get to us, and that's what differentiates them. So I suppose it would be remiss of me to not highlight the important employer obligations we have being an employer. And it doesn't matter whether you have 1 staff member or you have 101, you have to have the right foundations in place. And legally, those foundations are based at, you know, ensuring you've got a contract of employment, you've got your staff handbook with your really comprehensive policies, etc. And you're familiar with your obligations as an employer. And that's just a given foundation, that's just a given expectation, but it's a really important one that you should upskill your managers in, or familiarize yourself if it's an area that you're thinking, well, we didn't think we needed to do that yet because we don't have that many people. So just an important point to note. The right to disconnect is a recent code of practice that has come in, and it's reminding us of, again, the emphasis on people's work-life balance. And this really is emphasizing we've already a piece of legislation in place that gives people working hours, etc. But what this ultimately means is when you finish your shift today, you should be given the opportunity to not be required to constantly be on your email, responding to emails. And remember, if people work in different jurisdictions, etc., that's perfectly fine and accepted, I suppose. Ultimately, though, the right to disconnect means that you're not switched on all of the time. When you finish your day's work today, you finish and people are able to turn their laptop off. And particularly now that we've blurred the lines between work and office, because a lot of people are working remotely, that's where it becomes even more important that we do that. Well-being is a huge focus and has been right throughout COVID, and it's no different now. And that, I suppose, well-being focus is something that is making people realize that that employer really cares more about me than anything else. And it's building connectedness and very loyal employees. And again, making managers aware of what are the key obligations around that, because during the COVID journey, people have experienced anxiety, issues in relation to confidence, worried about family, friends, or themselves. And we need to be able to embrace the fact that we employ the whole individual, and we need to be focused on maximising people's well-being, particularly now in the remote and hybrid world. It's become more important again. Engagement and communication are crucial. And like whenever we do employee surveys, one of the things that always comes up is people want more communication and more feedback, even in organizations who do a brilliant job of it. So it's really important. I've written a whole book called The Art of Asking the Right Questions, emphasizing the importance in the HR journey of engaging and communicating with your team and continually asking, what can we do better? Is there anything that you feel we can improve? Is there anything I can help you with? Do you need more support, etc.? And for me, that engagement and communication, the more you do of it, the better the output as a result of that. So I suppose it's really been a roller coaster for managers during the last 18 months. And for many managers, we just expected that they would manage in the new model of work that has come about without giving them any coaching, guidance, or training. And I empathize hugely for those managers, because it's really, really different managing a remote team or hybrid team than it is managing a team that are in the office, where collaboration and teamwork, etc., are just more easily organic. So to me, I think we need to press pause and say, do we need to train our managers better or differently? I think it's one of the key things for me is culture will eat strategy for breakfast, which means that no matter how much time you put into developing your strategy, if you haven't a really strong focus on your culture and your tone and how we do things around here, and setting really important core values for how we work in your company, it's very hard to make sure that that culture you want for your company is cascaded throughout the organization to every employee. Doesn't matter where they work in the world, or where they work remotely, or whether they work in your hub, etc. So think about, what are your core values? Think about, have you set the tone for your culture? And remember, culture for me is the number one priority. And number two is your strategy, because without your culture, your strategy can't come to life. So for me, it's a huge key ingredient of drafting your strategy, which is setting your culture. And it's the number one element for me. Creating open environments for employees to learn and share ideas. Mistakes have to be okay. They only become problematic when they're repeated, and encouraging people to have that open environment for that freedom to share learning and ideas, and develop ideas for improvements, and have that focus on continuous improvement. We talk about teacup moments in our business, thinking correctly under pressure. And we share, okay, what are the things that you experienced that you were under pressure, so we can share those learnings, and as a result the team get better because we put systems and processes in place to make that better again the next time around. I suppose you heard me mention the importance of communication and feedback being the two big things that come up in every employee survey. And meeting with your employees on a one-to-one to discuss their performance and their goals can't get lost in this new hybrid world. And it has become more and more important of ensuring that people are clear on what is expected, how are we going to make improvements, how are we going to address the issues, and I suppose overall identifying and assessing how we can improve and create that morale and that team environment that we want so badly. So in terms of remote working, I suppose maximize the potential of it. Do your risk assessment. Remember, for every person who's working remotely, we need to do a risk assessment to confirm that they've got the right setup in terms of that risk assessment. Ergonomically, they've got the right chair and table, etc. Ensure that we maximize the positivity of the experience for them. Helping the whole issue around confidentiality is huge, because for many, confidentiality can't be achieved in a shared, for example, apartment or house where many people are living. People working abroad, what are the implications? Make them aware of the tax issues. We spoke about Facebook earlier. For many organizations, they give people that opportunity to work abroad for specific periods of time. And again, helping people understand that. People can, though, work from anywhere, and embracing that is really important, because still many companies are reluctant to trust their employees, and that's key to the employment relationship working well, that people will get the work done. And policies around that help it work better for everybody, because everybody's in relation to the expectation we have of our people, and vice versa, because without trust, we're not going to make the employment relationship work positively for the overall success of the business. Remember, working remotely is not for everybody. For many people, they're absolutely dying to get back into a structured environment, whether that's a hub, a shared working environment, or an office, because they're in a shared house, they're missing people, they might be new employees, and they're missing opportunities for training, engagement, collaboration, etc. So think about, what are the top tips for your managers to manage remotely? and focus in and zone in on that cybersecurity piece, which is using your own email and Gmail, things like, you know, we've seen lots of obviously very serious issues in relation to cybersecurity. So again, it's all the more important when people are working remotely. So some key points, and then I'm going to pass you over to Susan to engage in some of your questions, and it's brilliant to see so many of you asking them. So for me, the starting point always is get into the helicopter and be clear on the business case and what your business needs, both for current growth, for succession planning, for growth, and also think about your attraction and your retention strategy in relation to your business strategy going forward. Consider entry-level people with amazing attitude, brilliant competencies, transferable skills that we can train specifically to suit your job. And I think we underestimate how amazing the contribution they can make if we have the right environment to help them flourish. Plan your recruitment early. So when you need to recruit slow and carefully, and put time into your employer branding, your attraction strategy, your selection strategy, and really make sure you try and get the very best people on board, and think about that rewards package in terms of really being different. Think about outside the box in relation to flexibility, benefits, work arrangements, etc., to attract new talent. And you can trial anything. And don't be afraid to do so, to say, okay, well, we're going to trial this, we're going to see how it goes, and then we'll revisit it, and we may need to tweak it, etc., which is perfectly fine as well. Think about where your talent pool comes from, and think differently regarding where you may source from. Remember your employer obligations. As I say, it's key foundations that need to be put in place. And remember your induction and training to help them onboard people needs to be much stronger now, as we are doing a lot of that remotely. And I think that's one of the fabulous opportunities as we get more into the hybrid space, where we'll be able to do the blend of both, where we're going to see lots of opportunity. And remember to mind yourself and your team. If you have an employee assistance program or other initiatives, make sure you make people aware of them, because the journey for the last 18 months has been a roller coaster for all businesses, with peaks and troughs, that we need to make sure that we're minding people on that journey as best we can. And it's really important to celebrate the successes, celebrate the wins as they go. And I suppose for me, I think this was a saying. My grandfather was a great man for the sayings, and this is one of my favorites that he used to say, and I'm sure he heard it from somebody along the way, but for us, we always give him the full credit for it. But in terms of enjoying the journey, and in the whole area of HR and business in general, I think this is a great summary, which says we need a wishbone to dream the dream. We need a backbone to work hard to make it happen. And we need a funny bone to enjoy the journey of life. And I think that's a brilliant summary of the employment journey, the entrepreneur's journey, and the business journey, and overall life's journey. And I think if we've got those three ingredients, we're not going to go too far wrong. So thank you all for listening. I hope you've all got some nuggets from this session, and delighted to hand you back over to Susan.
Caroline, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I tweeted there as you were speaking to say that, you know, no matter how often I've heard you, is that you always pack a session properly full of value. And we are going to continue that trend now. Absolutely.
Excellent. Super. Delighted to do so.
And what we're going to do now, Caroline, is, as you say, I'm going to take some questions from all over. Just there's lots of conversation happening in Twitter. Westpick, for example, has tweeted to say great insight on how the workplace of the future will look like from Caroline, founder of HR Suite. And the quote is, employers are now embracing what a role will look like. Micromanagement is long gone. And I'm seeing lots and lots more happen. And I'm keeping a very, very close eye on that over there. Right, so Caroline, let's get right into a couple of the Q&A here. First of all, Miguel is asking this question from Galway. Miguel asks, about remote working on a global scale and beyond the EU context, how is the Irish government's understanding of the limits of legislation to hire talent abroad or working with talent abroad?
So I suppose this is a whole new area of navigation now. And I think Facebook have really, I suppose, exploded that into a further level again by saying you can work absolutely anywhere in the globe and they're going to be able to support it. Facebook are very lucky that they're in the position that they nearly have a hub of work anywhere in the world. So it definitely, I suppose, brings that opportunity for them. We still in Ireland have challenges in relation to you need a work permit depending on specific jobs that you need to apply for. There's only work permits available for specific types of jobs. And we still have the tax restrictions that if you work outside of Ireland for an Irish company for more than 183 days, there is both tax and employment implications for employees and employers. So I think, Miguel, we're going to see a lot of careful navigation of that depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the job type. But I think the key message in this is if you can't get the skills you need within the talent pool, now we have an opportunity to broaden that spectrum to a much broader base, and we will navigate it. Whereas previously, I think we were thinking, okay, well, that's just not going to be possible. Whereas now I think, like I've a client and they are looking for specific IT gurus, and we navigated the work permit process, etc. And they're now working remotely for an Irish company, and their skill set has been a game changer for that company. So, you know, but again, it's navigating the individual elements of employment law and tax. So it's not straightforward, but it's worth it if you get the right people, because as we've been saying today, for me, the culture and the people make the strategy happen. Without the culture and the people, we have a strategy which we can't bring to life.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that you say often is about culture and strategy and the distinguishing of their priority. StoryLab has just tweeted here, great advice from the always brilliant and inspiring Caroline Reedy from the HR Suite at this morning's conference. So great to have you here with the StoryLab. Now Eugene has a comment that I think you might just want to address. So Eugene Murphy says, I think Caroline's pointers are especially valid for attracting folks from, e.g. multinationals to startups. I mean, Caroline, that is another challenge, isn't it, really, of remote working is, of course, is that the existing Irish workforce could be recruited abroad. And we know that multinationals here have also been recruiting a lot of great talent as they should and as they can. And of course, and we welcome that. But there are startups that need to recruit great talent too. So what's your reaction to Eugene's point? I think Caroline's pointers are especially valid for attracting folks from, e.g. multinationals to startups.
I think that startups now have a fabulous advantage because they can give, you know, the flexibility in such a broad way to suit what they really need as a business. And I think startups are so innovative because they are a startup and they have to be, that, you know, again, that's a huge advantage that they have. So all of the different elements of what we've been talking about this morning, if you're a multinational organization, you need to make really big decisions at a very senior level to make the change. And sometimes that change might take a bit longer, it might be a bit slower, there might be more hoops to go through. Whereas if you're a startup in Ireland, you can now say, lads, we'd love you to, for example, we'd love you to do the hybrid model, where you can be surfing at 5:30 in the evening, every evening in the Achill Coast, yet you can work for us and we only need you to come to the office 1 day a week or something like that. And that's why I emphasized to say, what is your USP? So as an organization now, we need to think differently. And that's why I think the testimonials from current employees are bring it to life for them. That's what people want now. People want a meaningful job. They want to be paid fairly. But outside of that, they want a company that's going to give them a brilliant work-life balance. And it doesn't matter what stage of life they're at. Work-life balance is different for everybody, but giving them that work-life balance and that flexibility and having the opportunity to make those decisions in a startup can be quite easily done. And I think that's giving them a huge competitive advantage as a result.
It's interesting you talk about the video testimonials, because a lot of people turn to Glassdoor these days, particularly for the larger companies, in order, it's like TripAdvisor for companies really. Whereas the video testimonial really puts that out there, doesn't it? It really says, look, you can go anywhere and talk to anyone, but we'll tell you what it's like here from our own experience. Now, Maria brings up a point, and this is really looking through a startup point of view as well. Maria says, how do you manage trust if you're a small business? Often startups struggling would take on their first member of staff. Will trust be a bigger issue now because the employee is not beside them? Can you advise on how best to manage that, and any tools that you can put in place that may help with that big step? And it is a big step, Caroline. I mean, well, for those of you who know you, we know that you took on your first staff member from the very, very beginning. But could you just take us through your personal journey of that, and as well as any tools and techniques you could have to manage that?
Yeah, I'd be delighted. I suppose I'm from a gorgeous place in the world in Ballyheigue in County Kerry. And when I set up the HR suite, I was living in Kerry. I now live in Dublin. And when I was living in Kerry, I suppose I always knew that the business vision I had was, you know, a team of people offering, I suppose, a very comprehensive HR offering. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. So I recruited what was the best talent. And that has been a mix of remote workers, people who are never in the office, people have a mix of working in the office and working from home. I've staff who work early mornings, finish early in the day, staff who work long days and work less hours. So for me, I felt that before ever COVID happened, it was a necessity for me as a business owner to get the very best talent to offer the best service to my customers. The only way to do that was to get an advantage over others by offering as much flexibility as I could. Maria's so right, and it's such a great observation. Without trust, you have nothing. And for me, like, I'm a massive believer in setting parameters and boundaries. And as companies are more agile now, and most organizations have agile businesses and agile strategies, we need to set boundaries. So everybody's on the same page, everybody knows what to expect, but those boundaries are exactly that, they're boundaries, but they're based on the fundamental principle of trust. So for example, things like, look, the hours you're at work, I expect you to be available for work. That's one of the simple principles as far as I'm concerned, so that you're not nipping out in the middle of the day to do something for an hour when I think you're at work. However, then that works both ways. Because we have that trust, they equally know that they've got that flexibility to say, listen, I need to do X, but I'll do Y later, you know. And you need to set good boundaries, but you need it to be based on trust. Like, over COVID, there's been a huge amount of challenge and discussion around click monitoring, you know, cameras, and, you know, how people would monitor people. And for me, it's always been back to, if you as an employer feel the need to do that, we haven't the right culture and we haven't the right core values. So let's actually rewind. Let's set the core values with the team. And for me, like, I always, when I'm setting core values with any company, positivity and trust are always two, because without positivity, I mean, I'm allergic to it not being there, because I think we have to be positive and enthusiastic as a team, and trust is the other one. And again, you know, psychic management doesn't work is something that I always say. Psychic communication doesn't either, because sometimes we can be thinking it. So I can be thinking, well, Susan knows she needs to be at work based on the fact we've agreed 7:45 in the morning to 2:15 in the day to suit her. Sure, of course she knows she needs to be there and can't nip out for an hour in the middle of the day. But Susan might think, sure, there's no problem, and I can work that hour back in the evening, and sure, I don't need to say anything to anyone. So each person could be thinking that they're doing the right thing by the other, but psychic management means just say it, we nip it in the bud and we move on. So setting those boundaries is important to that trust relationship. And again, more communication, more collaboration, more discussion, that always is the way to go, because people join organizations and leave managers. And for me, I'd add in leave culture, because if the culture isn't right, people don't want to be part of it. And people have loads of choice now. So we need to make sure, and again, remember the whole thing about HR. I started my career many months ago on Kerry Group, and HR's function is to support the business to achieve its strategy. And without having the people and the culture, it can't achieve its strategy. So our job in supporting that has to be focused on the culture, the people, the full kind of, you know, eco environment to give people that opportunity to perform at their best.
And there's so much in there around the fact of what really culture is, and the fact that it is like that it's not based on psychic lack of communication, but setting the parameters, and as you say, simply saying things can often nip them in the bud for sure. Eugene says, thanks Susan and Caroline. Eugene, you're very kind to thank me, but as Caroline is doing all the work, he said, I was appreciating the structure and processes outlined. In the past, I've transitioned from multinational to startup, and if it's the Wild West, i.e. no structures or processes, it can be scary for less experienced folks. Again, great pointers. Then he says, teamwork makes the dream work, Susan. Absolutely. I'm going to go over to John. Okay, so John has sent in this question as well, Caroline. Hi folks, thanks for running this webinar today. A question for Caroline. From a HR perspective, what role will emotional intelligence play in the development of the team and talent pool in the hybrid environment? And this is from John Tiernan, High Performance Coaching.
I think that for me, it's probably, you know, when I was talking about occupational personality assessments, recruit slow, recruit for aptitude, you know, for the personality and train for the aptitude. For me, I suppose, if you can recruit the right person, i.e. the right personality fit, the right culture fit, the right competencies, I think you're absolutely 20 times more likely to be successful than if you just recruit for somebody's CV, which is the qualification or, you know, the experience that they bring. Because as Eugene rightly highlighted, the difference between a startup and a multinational, or, you know, a family-owned business, or a, you know, a startup hub, etc. Each of those might have their own personalities, their own culture, their own fit of personality to have the right person. And emotional intelligence, a bit like teamwork makes the dream work, emotional intelligence makes the dream work equally. Because for me, I mentioned I feel sorry for managers during the last year and a half. We've very little investment done in training managers to manage in the remote and hybrid space. So we're depending on the good managers doing a good job because they're reaching out more, etc. And the poor manager who has never been trained doesn't really know if they need to do more or not. So I think we've a big void there and we need to readdress it. But for me, emotional intelligence is crucial. It's something throughout my career. I think the more we develop young graduates early as they come out in that whole space of emotional intelligence, like many of them are lucky enough to have worked in hospitality or tourism or retail early in their career, and you know, as a result, they've started to develop the key elements of what emotional intelligence is. But I think that empathy, that you know, understanding all of those key ingredients of emotional intelligence during the COVID journey have really made some managers shine, some employees shine, being an amazing team player. I think I'm not a soccer fan, so I don't know these people's names, but I think when we saw during the week that captain of the soccer team, and basically he just did everything right, being a leader of a team and being a leader in a crisis situation. And you can't train people for that. That was his natural instinct to respond, you know, and he was just a standout example of a leader, wasn't he? And I think those kind of things are fostered from so many places in a person, that it's a culmination of all of those. But I think training, reinforcement, again, the culture, the values, setting that tone of that's what we want in this business, I think you're going to get more and more of it. And again, I think you're going to have hugely successful people who love working with those type of managers as a result of fostering it.
And you know, your point is really resonating with our audience today. Specifically, Empower Her has tweeted to say, key ingredient for hiring the right person, hire for attitude, train and skill. Excellent advice from Caroline Reedy of the HR Suite at this morning's conference. So it's certainly getting through. It really is. I want to put a very practical question to you. This comes in from Martha. And Martha says, as a small business, what are your responsibilities in terms of providing equipment to staff to work from home? We have all been working from home since the start of the pandemic. So we brought all the staff's infrastructure home. If we return to a hybrid working place, will the employer have to provide laptops, etc., for the employees? This is going to be a big expense for smaller companies, but is it necessary?
So the answer is yes. We have to provide the tools to facilitate the person to do their job. And for many organizations now, in the planned return of hybrid, which is landing as the kind of most common approach for many, it's a case of having an investment strategy in relation to what does that look like. Because for many, as Martha rightly said, it is a big investment, because you potentially have people with desks that they need to have, desks in the office as well as proper desks at home. They need devices, etc. So again, trying to identify how are we going to land there, I think is a big deal. But your obligation is twofold. One is it's to ensure you've done a risk assessment remotely. So you can do that over Zoom, for example, to check that, for example, Susan, you have the right table, you have the right chair, you have the right laptop in terms of distance, etc. And again, you need to keep a record of that, because it doesn't matter where the person is, if they're in the office or if they're at home, your same obligation ensuring they have a safe place to work still applies. And then the device is the same. Your obligation is to facilitate the devices. And my massive NB around that is we've had an awful lot of data breaches with clients over COVID, where you've had people working from home, innocently forgetting that they have secure confidential data, and all of a sudden we have a data breach. So I think that's a good reminder to people in relation to devices, et cetera, to really get that kind of addressed, I suppose. But yeah, you need all the key practical things are required in both home and the office if they're going to do both. And hopefully it's a laptop that they can bring from one location to another, ideally to reduce cost for people. And desks, can be hot desks, for example. A lot of people are looking at pods where you might set up a neighborhood, for example. So if you have different teams in the organization, the manager can book his whole team to be in a neighborhood that day, for example, or in a pod that day with social distancing. So I think that hot desking of teams is going to be important, because people will definitely have less space, less office space, because we still have to maintain safe distancing, managing canteen areas, etc., for a while yet.
And I think that that's a really important question that Martha asked, because a lot of people think that, returning to the workplace is just, it's a matter of physically going back from A to B, but there needs to be, when they physically get back to B, that as you say, the tools have to be there. Caroline, I'm going to paraphrase a question that has come in. So Giuliano asks, what is the labour and tax regime for people working remotely from abroad for, say, an Irish company? The reason I'm going to paraphrase this is, can I ask you to distinguish the roles of an Irish company depending on if they have staff abroad and a subcontractor abroad? Because the subcontractor route can often deal with an awful lot of the employee issues. So Giuliano, if it's okay, I'm just going to ask Caroline to, deal with both angles on that, please.
Okay, great question, Juliana, and something that's coming up a lot for companies now, where people have, for example, relocated home for a while. A lot of companies said, look, you need to come back. You can't, kind of overstay the tax implications for the companies. And now they're looking at potentially giving people sabbaticals abroad for up to 3 months, for example, within a specific period of time. So the answer, Juliana, is it depends on the different jurisdictions. And, ultimately some jurisdictions will mean that if the employee is working there for over a period of time, the company needs to set up an employment hub in that location. Hence, you will have seen the companies saying you need to come back because we didn't know you were working wherever you were working, and that now creates an issue. So I would say that's something that you would have to look at on a case-by-case basis and on a specific basis, because there's not just implications for the employer, there's also potential obligations from an employee perspective. And it's so common now that Revenue have a specific fact sheet on their website explaining about dual taxation, etc. But you would definitely be advised to address the employer and the employee obligations, both from a tax and an employment law point of view. And as a result, I think many companies are landing at, okay, we'll allow it for a period, but we mightn't be able to allow it longer. You then mentioned contractors, Susan, and for that piece, it's really important to distinguish between an employee and a contractor. A contractor has other clients, they're doing other work as well, etc. And if you have a contractor, then they're a self-employed person. So they look after everything about themselves, but you need to have a very strong contractors agreement in place so that there is no blurring of the lines for somebody to say, well, actually, they might be an employee and not a contractor after all. So a lot of people are using the contractor option for that benefit, so that they don't have to navigate all of the other elements. But we're also finding that a lot of people want to come to Ireland. That people see Ireland as, we've managed COVID very positively. They want to work somewhere that they feel, is vibrant and healthy and has all the beauty of our coastland and our inner, we can't forget the Midlands either, but people want to work in Ireland. So I think we need to get to that attraction pool. So when I was saying to where does talent come from, there's lots of people out there that want to work in Ireland too. And we've Erasmus students, and we've our own talent pool of students who may not be going abroad as much as they did for the year that's in it. And I think we've lots of new talent opportunities to tap into as well, which makes it all very exciting for a business to navigate.
I mean, it can be a minefield, Caroline, and yet it can work out so well if you get the right fits. I have another question in here from Fintan. While I'm asking you this, can I just ask the people who are here from LYIT, Sligo IT, and GMIT, if you might maybe just pop things into the chat there as well, if any of your incubation clients or people within your communities have questions like this, can you just maybe direct them to who they might contact within the incubation centres as well, so that people know of another place that they can go? The question that Fintan asks here is, thanks CUA for this conference today. In terms of thinking outside the box, how have you found any better way than an interview to onboard people if we want to recruit for attitude and train competencies?
I suppose, Fintan, I'm the biggest fan of doing what I call like good interviews. So I rarely will ask someone to take me through their CV, for example. I'm all about what are the competencies we need, and then asking great questions around that. So one of the questions I'll ask, is give me one of the thinking correctly under pressure moments you've had recently, and how did you handle it? Again, because that'll give me a way more insight than reading the CV back to me, which I could have read already. So I think do a really good competency-based interview, prepare really great questions is my first starting point. And then for me, I'm a huge fan of occupational personality assessments, OPQs, and occupational personality assessments are online tests that we send to people remotely. They do them, and they give us a really good insight into the fact of what is Caroline's thinking style, working style, etc., etc. And what that does is it helps me assess the fit that Eugene spoke about at the very early stages of our Q&A, which is talking about the big multinational or the small startup who's going to be really excited about growth, because you might need to be really amazing at multi-skilling and not be, guidance, and, things might be a little bit less clear at the early stages because you need all hands on deck in a startup versus the structure maybe later on in the multinational. So again, all these tools are brilliant at helping us decipher, will Caroline fit well in this culture? Will she fit well in this environment? And will she thrive as a result? So that's a really great tool. And I would also be a fan of get them to do something as close to real life as possible. So if I'm recruiting, for example, somebody to do training, for example, I would say, okay, I'm going to get you to present a 10-minute training video, or, for me, the camera, and do some Q&A. Again, get them to do something that's as close to real life. For example, IKEA get people to put a table together. So, use the tools that are available to us. And, in the hybrid world, we can do an awful lot if we think about it, because remember, hire slow and thoroughly, and really, get the best people that you can. As the great Jim Collins said, on the bus, get the best people that you can on that bus, because seats are limited. And the last thing you want is to have somebody taking up a really important seat on your bus who will be a blocker in terms of moving your strategy forward.
Caroline, there's lots more happening here, and I know we've only limited time left. So first of all, I just want to mention that there's all of the various people from LYIT, GMIT, and Sligo IT they've all posted their contact details in there. So anybody that has any issues there or any questions, please do reach out to them. Maybe Caroline, when you're finished, you might just pop your own contact details in there into the chat as well. But this time I'm asking you kind of a question from me. It's kind of a statement, kind of a question.
Go for it.
One time, we've been fortunate to work together a couple of times, but one time I remember listening to you after I had spoken at a conference in Europe after me, and you gave one piece of advice that day that I have since used so often, and you were the person that spoke about it, is the power of the exit interview. There's nobody that would, if they're an intern, if they're a subcontractor, if there's anybody who has worked in our business, I now run an exit interview, and I have learned so much from them. Could you just talk about the power of the exit interview, what it is, and why it's not done? Well, I didn't do it before because I hadn't spoken to you, but maybe why it's not more common.
Yeah, I suppose I would say two things about that. I would say ask loads of questions and create a learning environment and a sharing, collaborative environment between the people that are working with you to try and see how can we improve things, what is their feedback, etc. And doing that in that context is powerful. But when somebody knows they're leaving, for whatever reason that is, I think the freedom of being able to give really honest feedback is powerful. And for me, I suppose, again, I'm back to asking questions, but like, you don't know what you don't know. And, oftentimes we think, well, Susan was really happy in the job and she's just leaving because she wants to go traveling. But then when you start chatting to Susan, Susan is suggesting, well, I felt I was micromanaged, or I felt I wasn't appreciated, and you're going, oh my God, how do you mean you weren't appreciated? You were the best thing since sliced bread. We absolutely thought you were amazing. So the power of the exit interview means that you can put a corrective action plan in place, or what Susan really valued, you mightn't have thought that there was any value on that. So now you can incorporate it into your attraction strategy. So like, people are brilliant when you ask and when you probe, when they know it's a safe space to do so, at giving us lots of feedback and lots of insight. And I feel that, again, for you as a business owner, the thing that'll keep you awake at night generally is your people. So when somebody is leaving and you're thinking, how am I going to fill the gap? Or when you're thinking that you want to move on and focus on another area of the business, or you want to spend less time working in the business, or whatever the case may be, and you're now looking to recruit more people, or you've got this really amazing opportunity and you need to grow your team, or you have a problem employee who you just unfortunately recruited the wrong person, and unfortunately they got through probation. So again, probation is one of those NB, manage it, really well. So like, people problems, are one of the things that you just need to be really proactive about. And, always, if you know that there's a problem, it'll never go away, it'll only get worse. So always try and be as proactive as you can with dealing with it. And I think the exit interview is a powerful tool at getting insight into both positives and challenges that can help you make improvements going forward.
It really has helped, Caroline, I have to say. And the other thing I ask as well in that exit interview is, what advice would you give to me about managing the team that I have better? And I've got some really interesting insights and that I've carried through in them. So I'm really glad that I heard that from you. It's a kernel of knowledge that I've certainly turned into action many times. Here's what I've learned from you today, among the many other, among all of the other things that has been tweeted, etc., is to cultivate a culture of shared learning. People want different things these days, including paid mental health days, and look at employee benefits that are different. You said hire slowly and thoroughly, but fire fast and legally. Video testimonials are a great way to show what goes on in a company's culture for real, what it's really like to work here. Hire on attitude and train on skill. You said celebrate the wins, and I'm a big fan of your granddad, I have to say. I love his advice too. I particularly like this one. Mistakes have to be okay. It's only a problem when they get repeated. You said that there's a void in training managers for this hybrid world. You said we need to develop graduates in emotional intelligence early, and also you recommend occupational personality questions as well as great interview questions themselves. Is there anything else in our final minute with you, Caroline, that you'd like to share with our audience before you go today?
Susan, that's just an absolutely amazing summary. As well as chairing the event, you managed to get all of that. That's amazing. I think the biggest thing I would say to you is people management within your business. If you don't give it the time and focus it deserves, it'll become something that becomes a problem rather than an opportunity. So setting brilliant foundations around thinking of what is my culture, what is my core values, thinking about what is my attraction strategy, what is my selection strategy, what's my retention strategy, how am I going to ensure I get feedback, how am I going to, do all of the culture piece that we spoke about and really ensure that that's core to everything we do. Remember, like the strategy is going to be like, all of you have amazing strategies and exciting things planned for your business, but culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So, spending time on the people piece. And once you have the foundations in place, funnily, people managers, it happens to just naturally work in a business. It's only when it gets no care or attention that it really becomes a problem. So I'd like to wish everybody the best of luck on the journey. It's really exciting to be involved in such a progressive conference. Well done to everybody for organising it. And it really has been my pleasure to be with you here today. And hopefully you've all got some nuggets from it and you've enjoyed the session.
Brilliant, Caroline. Thank you very, very much indeed. And if anybody would like to get in contact with you afterwards, I know you've put your email in the chat box. The hrsuite.com is your website, and I have to highly recommend The Art of Asking the Right Questions. It's a book that it's a lovely hardback book, and it's quite small and there's lots of pictures in it, but it's really, really practical. And I have recommended this, as Caroline knows, in many corners of the world. So I highly recommend reading that as well. She splits it into 3 parts as well. There's questions for yourself, questions for your team, and questions when you're hiring. So very, very practical read indeed. Caroline Reedy, thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
To every success.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. So we are right on time. And before I bring in before I bring you our panel from all corners of the West and the Northwest of Ireland, what I'm going to ask you to do, please, is I'm just going to post a link here into the chat. And if I could ask for everybody, please, to click on it. And in this conference, what we really want to do is make sure that you're in the driver's seat with us, not in the back seat. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to click on that link. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and we'd just like to hear a couple of things from you so that we can get a very good sense of who is here and what you care about. Okay, so first question is, where is your business based? Okay, we have the first answer here, which is Sligo. Okay, let's hear it. Now, by the way, I've structured this question in such a way where the bigger the word is, the bigger the font is, then the more answers have come from there. Okay, so we've Mayo, Ballinrobe, Galway, Sligo, Letterkenny. Okay, let's see where else there is now. Just in case, if anybody wasn't able to click on the link, you can always go to menti.com at the top of the screen and put in that code. Okay, we have Clare, Sligo. So Mayo seems to be winning. Mayo for Sam is here, clearly by the look of it. And let me see, what else have we got here? I'm just taking a look here at things because they're coming at me from all directions. Ballinrobe, Burtonport, Belfast, great, okay. Letterkenny, Donegal, Castlebar, Buncrana. Okay, so we've had 26 answers in there so far. I'm just going to give this another, it's 12:16 here now. I'm going to give this until 12:17. Okay, it's exactly 12:17 now. Brilliant. 30 answers in. I know that there's lots more than you hear than that. So I'm just going to pop that link there into the chat again so that you can participate, because I have 3 other questions for you. Okay, so anybody that wants to get involved in this, just click on the link. It's in the chat. If you can't find it, go to menti.com and you'll see the code up there at the top. You can pop that in either. It's 20618498. Right. So far, I can see Mayo, Sligo and Galway are the biggest, and someone of you is still in your head. Okay, very good, very, very good indeed. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a different question. Okay, so what do you need in terms of support for your business to succeed, right? So maybe this can be supports that an incubation center can share with you, or alternatively, this might be something outside of that. Let's just see, in terms of supports, Enterprise Ireland are also a sponsor of this conversation today. So we're very happy to share the answers with them. So we're just going to give you a moment there now. Just going to refresh my screen there to make sure I'm capturing everything. Okay, finance, infrastructure, mentoring, HR and tax advice, IT support, okay. So far we have 7, we have funding, hand-holding on innovation. So to that person, I highly recommend that you look into that innovation partnership, because that's been our experience of it. A lot of people here saying mentoring, some people saying finance and funding. You're going to hear a little bit about that as well from our panel members. Growth strategy for professional services, funding for home office setup so staff can continue to work remotely, business strategy, financing, mentoring on marketing, innovation center expansion, interesting, working capital, limited drama, okay, funding, web development supports for small business, more than a digital voucher. And indeed, we also avail of the trading online voucher, and definitely expanded versions of that can be very helpful. Early stage funding, proof of concept. Again, there's also, by the way, the Innovation Partnership feasibility study that we applied for and got on our way towards the Innovation Partnership. I definitely recommend that you look that up. Brilliant way as well to risk share with the government, as well as gain access to brilliant university resources, while bringing the best of your own entrepreneurial ability to it. Support advice, Enterprise Ireland, even to talk meeting. Okay, right, that's interesting. And I'm going to reflect all of this back. Less bureaucracy, keep it simple, okay? I'm going to reflect all of this back, but it is very important to hear this from you. Okay. Third question, 3 of 4. 3 of 4 is this. We are about to talk to some 4 really great people about scale. But rather than just ask them what their definition of scale is, as I say, we want you to be in the passenger seat here beside us. What is your definition of scale? Because we're talking about scaling your business in this hybrid working world. We've discussed a lot now about the hybrid working world with Caroline, but scale. What is scale to you? Let's just hear what you have to say here now. Okay. A lot of people thinking. I'm just taking a look over here. While you're doing that, I'm taking a look over here at the hashtag, and a lot of, okay. I'm going over here now to see that IT Sligo Innovation Centre is alive and kicking here on Twitter, which is fantastic. GMIT Hubs, thank you very much indeed for tweeting. Remember, anyone that does tweet on hashtag CUAConf, we will make sure to give you some retweets and so on. So take advantage of that digital opportunity as well. Okay. What have we got here? We've got expanding into new markets. Okay, so there might be an export focus there. Global reach. Okay, that's good, because we're going to talk today about growing globally, growing nationally and internationally, going from national to globalize. Okay, we've got a big geographical point of view here. Certainly, Anne, thank you indeed. Anne has just said that she's been very happy with what she's seen. She's going to come back to us. Brilliant, Anne. Grow margin to be profitable. Scale isn't about growing turnover if it costs grow at the same pace. Okay. USA to Europe presence, increasing the efficiency of our solution or product. I'm going to go back there. Sorry, I've gone to the wrong direction there now, and I need to go on back over here. Okay. You said growing from just me. You said going global. You said sustainable rates match with the right and retained talent. Growing the talent client base and associated processes. You said new markets, doubling my business within 2 years by expanding nationally and into new markets. So as we can see here, what I'm getting here is a really strong geographical train of thought. A lot of you here are talking about who you're going to sell to, or increasing the amount of people that you're going to sell to. I'm also going to put questions like this to our panel, but I'm also going to discuss business model as well. Because I know from my experience, the first time we started doing business abroad, the first country we started dealing with was Malta. And then because we were training business, and thus the business model wasn't scalable because it was just me at the time. When I sold in one country, it was brilliant for a variety of reasons, and something we continue to do. We've built and grown many, many, many times since. But when you took me out of one country and put me into another, well, then you removed the capability or the capacity out of one country as well. The business model also needs to support scale. Another word that I think we'll probably come up with a lot as well in terms of scale is repeatable business. That is not an issue when it comes to, for example, product, as long as you've got a good solid supply chain that can be scaled up or scaled down, or SaaS, software as a service, something like Dropbox, obviously depends on server space and customer service. And we also work with a US company where we're responsible for their SaaS product in Europe. And you find that when it looks like from the outside, it looks like, yeah, well, we can just sell as much product as we can manage. Actually, you also need the support structure in place then from the customer service and so on like that as well. Okay, so, right. Really good to see this. Last question, right? Last question is, how many people are employed in your company? We don't assume here that you were the founder, because you could be anybody involved in a company where you are interested in growing globally and working locally and scaling. So just want to get a sense in here, who do we have in the room? Okay, so far we have 1 to 5, 3. Okay, well, there's no point in me commenting here until we get a critical mass here of people in here. I love this particular question type. The technology that I'm using right here, by the way, is Mentimeter. I use it so often with so many things, and it can be a great way of taking the pulse using different question types. You see the way it works, and it will work on any, you know, the way that can be different on certain computers and servers that certain apps won't work. Mentimeter can be very, very helpful, particularly, by the way, particularly as well, you know, Caroline there was talking about doing the exit interview and hearing from people what they may not say directly or upfront. Running something like this, which is truly anonymous, can be super helpful to get, you know, to really get a sense of what questions people have. Okay, so far, 18 of you have answered. I'm just going to pop the link back into the chat there again, so that for anybody who wants to participate in this can, because we have many multiples of 18 on our conversation today. So what I'm seeing here thus far is that I'm seeing that predominantly we have the solopreneur up to the small business of 1 to 5 people. We have a couple of people then around the 6 to 10, 10 to 20, and then we've also got the 50 plus here as well. Well, you're all super, super welcome. And we just wanted to get a sense of who was in the room, what you needed to know. Now, I'm going to stop sharing. And at this stage, I'm going to ask 4 fantastic people to switch on their camera. So David Gilday, can I ask you to switch yours on, please? Elaine in Sligo, by the way, is her title on Twitter. Elaine Murphy, you're very welcome. Paul McBride, can I ask you also to switch on your camera, please? And also Louise Foodie. Brilliant. Thanks, Louise. Louise is here with us too. Okay, so you've been here for the last while. You've watched the way in which people have responded there. And of course, we get a sense now that scale to a lot of people here is geographical reach. We get a sense that companies are round about the under 10, maybe 10 to 20 mark. What they want is finance, what they want is mentoring, what they want is advice. They also want to engage with the agencies. So we're getting a sense of all that, and that there's a real concentration of the people here today, which, David, I know you're based in Donegal. Paul, I know you're in Mayo. Louise, you're based in Galway, and Elaine, you're in Sligo. So they're pretty much neighbours of you all. So on that note, now that we've set that scene, can I go around the room, please, and just ask you to tell me a little bit about you, not tell me, tell us all about you and your business, please. Elaine, can we start off with you?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. Pleasure to be here today, and wow, phenomenal engagement so far. Hopefully we can keep that up. I'm a proud graduate of IT Sligo and NUIG on the business side, Susan, and I've worked across many sectors in my career so far, everything from banking, hospitality, gaming, telecoms, and really, I suppose, specialised in the tech arena in the last 10 years. And that's everything from startups to multinationals. I'm originally from Galway, but definitely consider Sligo my adopted home. Been here for the last 20 years, just over 20 years. But would have definitely considered myself an export for half of that, where I would have been working in major cities and working abroad for many months a year. Just couldn't necessarily build the career that I wanted in the Northwest. And that all changed about 3 years ago, where I started working for an Aussie company headquartered in New York, came here to Ireland and looked and had a progressive mindset and looked at Sligo regional location, didn't see the barriers, and we've set up a digital transformation team, kind of a European hub here in Sligo, and we're just shy of 20 people, and now LiveTiles is the name of the company.
Brilliant. Thank you indeed, Elaine. And I love the fact that you say you just didn't see barriers and didn't see obstacles. It's a great mentality to have. Paul, can we go to you, please?
Yeah, and likewise, great conference so far, and amazed with the engagement. Is pretty cool. Look, like Elaine, I'm a graduate of DIT and Trinity College, both on the computer science and the business side. And look, was fortunate enough to work in both here and the US, you know, from an engineering perspective at Microsoft. And then, you know, in Mayo for the last 20 years, just, you know, building a multinational business from a subsidiary to a business unit. And then, you know, in the last few years, we've started our, I suppose, my third startup, second in Mayo, and we've been, you know, plugging along for the last couple of years and getting ready to scale. So that's the brief summary for myself.
Brilliant, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I've just seen a tweet in here from Noreen Henry saying, very insightful and energized conference here. And she notes the hashtag. So I'd say we have every confidence of continuing to keep that engagement very, very high indeed. Louise, how about you?
Hi, Susan, and hello, everybody. Lovely to see the Mayo people here as well. I actually grew up in Claremorris in County Mayo, and I've been away working with Kingspan for the guts of 15, 16 years. And later, towards the end of last year, I actually moved back to Galway. It's a feeling that it's kind of hard to describe to people, but it's just amazing to be here. Kingspan, you may or may not be familiar with us, but it's an Irish building materials company. It's a PLC, largely known for different types of insulation. And the major, I suppose, investment areas at the moment are the whole arena of sustainability and digitalization. So anyone who's looking to scale businesses, you need to be thinking about those two things, I would say. I was lucky enough to live in Canada and the UK for the guts of 8-9 years. Before moving back to Dublin. And I suppose on the topic of scaling, other than sustainability and digitalization, I've really, I suppose, lived through a business that has scaled massively. When I joined the organization, we were about 2,000 people. 70% of our trading business was in the UK and Ireland. And today we have 16,000 employees, operating and sales across 70 countries and turnover of over 5 billion. So my latest role, most of it has been in marketing, but quite interestingly, when Caroline earlier was talking about hire for attitude, I was definitely hired for attitude over the skill set because digitalization was completely new to me. And the business wanted to get really serious about this. So I said, we need, if we're going to approach this, it has to be something totally different. And we got the chance to kind of look at us in terms of a almost a startup company where we're servicing the businesses of Kingspan. So I'll be able to talk to you a little bit about that later and how we're doing it. So we're a team of 30 people now. I myself are based in Galway. We have a mix of fully remote, we have a mix of hybrid, and we have a mix of office full-time. So we have lots of dynamic to manage. But it's all worth it, you know, to be able to create that culture where you can move and adapt and do things. So the increased talent pool it has given us because of that openness is just incredible. So nice to be here and thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant, Louise. And indeed, we certainly will delve into those insights for sure. David, can I go to you to tell us a little bit about you and your career to date also, please?
Absolutely. And again, Mayo representing here. I grew up not too far away from Louise in a place called Knock in Mayo. So it's great to be here. Thank you for having me in the conversation. So I started in IT about 20 years ago and pretty much immediately started working as a consultant, which was both terrifying and also very rewarding because I got to see a lot. And when you're working for customers all the time, face to face, you start to learn about the real problems and also the expectations that they had. And fairly soon after that, I started working with the US companies very quickly. So I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time in the US, a lot of time working in major IT projects, some really very exciting projects, which led me to see some gaps in the market and basically, you know, led me to starting my own startup, Cloud Ranger, in 2014. And that was after many years of giving out about being employed. My wife eventually said, you know what, I'm sick of listening to you complain, but it's just quit and start a company. I think she regrets those words for about 4 years after that. But lucky enough that in 2018, we were acquired by Druva, which is, you know, world leader in backup and disaster recovery for IT companies. And I lead a product division there which manages cloud computing, backup and disaster recovery. So very exciting, you know, a really exciting company growing very fast. We're hopefully heading towards IPO in the next year or so. So going from starting with the startup at one person right through to a company and IPO is definitely a very exciting journey, and a lot of war stories along the way. But learned a lot, and hopefully can write a book one day about it all. So that's it.
Perfect. Great, David. Well, I have to say, we look forward to talking to you about that, and I'll do a book review for you as soon as it's done too. Let me know. I'm going to go back to Twitter here for a moment. Liam just quotes here, he says, clever approach polling the attendants to see what they'd like to hear about next. Lively conference overall, practical advice, and a bit of dare to dream in the ether too. Dare to dream to go from one person to IPO is absolutely there indeed, Liam, and we're going to put all of your points to the panel. Louise, we'll start off with you. One of the things that people said that they need in order to develop their business is IT support or IT infrastructure, etc. Now, you've overseen, and sorry, I shouldn't say that in the past tense, you are overseeing digital transformation in a very traditional industry. Now, what do you say then to those who want to use technology to scale their businesses, who are of the size that we have, which is predominantly, let's say, under 20 people?
What I would say, Susan, to everybody is not to be afraid of it, and to know that technologies are so within our reach. It is completely different to even 5 years ago. Digital technologies are actually incredibly accessible, and most technology you're ever going to need is probably available to you. Actually, all of the app technology that's used to build out Airbnb is accessible to everyone. There's only a couple of pieces that's proprietary to them. And why I'm telling you this is that not to be afraid of it, and that the accessibility is there, because people think digital is something for maybe Silicon Valley, or as David is bringing it to Mayo, which is wonderful amongst others, but it's still maybe seen as expensive, hard, what's that about? And one of the reasons I suppose I was asked to lead this role was around that whole area of how do I help business leaders, business owners, like we've hundreds of MDs from Russia to Australia to Vancouver. And if we're not able to explain to them in a simplified way that this is all possible and so accessible to them, you're kind of doomed before you start. We have a variety of businesses, I would say, from one customer to another business that might have 1,000 customers. So I kind of get to work with them all and see the differences. And it was interesting there from your poll to see the kind of 1 to people and 1 to 5 businesses. And for you guys, like, the great news is the smaller you are, the easier this is. So now that we all know we are living in a digitalized world where everyone has some sort of devices, that is the way business will want to be done and is being conducted. So I would say that knowing that, you're kind of off to a good start there. Like, who would have ever thought 18 months ago that farmers would be buying and selling cattle from their iPads? I mean, you just wouldn't have believed it if we were having that dialogue here, but that has happened. And sometimes, there's a little bit of force needed or external factors, but that world experimentation has happened. And I think the shackles need to come off for people to really embrace it. In terms of tips, I was thinking about, like, what tips or takeaways, like you were kind of working there with Caroline earlier, what's useful for people to know? Because I could tell you so much about our business, I'd need a month to do it. But the first thing I'd say, and the most valuable of what we've done over the last 3 years, and it's a real trend now, would be to very simply map out how your customers interact with you, a customer journey, and look at how much of that is online, how much of that is offline, and how much of that journey do you want to bring online? Because a lot of it you might not, and all of it you might. And once you do that, you'll then know where to focus. Where do I put my money? What do I put my investment? And where do I put my time? Because no matter if you're a 5 billion or a €5 size business, that is absolutely vital to kind of know where to go. My second tip, which I think is absolutely vital, is back to basic business studies class 101. There is a human at the center of everything digital and everything, every business transaction. So there's going to be a buyer and there's going to be a seller. And to use digital technologies to make those relationships even stickier, even better, and not to be afraid of them. So for example, like I can say to the guys, like, can you imagine how attractive it is for our CEO to say, do you think it might be nicer to be able to sell 24/7 rather than just 9 to 5? Do you think designers and architects designing and building buildings want to look at something on your terms? No, they want to look at it on their terms. So that means we have to be available when they need us. CRM systems. Do you ever go to a hotel and you've been there 10 times and they say to you, oh, hi, have you stayed with us before? And you're like, how is there no system telling them this? Because there probably is. If there were how just to create better experiences. So it can become, and it is to be used very human focus. I think at the center of everything digital is key. Nobody wants the world to be taken over by robots. And I think you just want to kind of get that balance going. And thirdly, I would say you got to jump right in. So this is something we toy with all the time. So again, small businesses, larger businesses, I don't believe through my experience, you can half do digital. You're either in or you're out. And the example I give people in my business is if you think about it in the physical world and compare digital and physical, and they might say to me, oh, Louise, there's a product or two, let's try and sell it in Brazil or France or the UK or whatever, wherever it might be, it doesn't really matter. We'll say, we'll put up a product and see what happens. And I'd say, no, would you open a shop downtown and put one shoe into it? Like, would Nike set up an online trading website and put a pair of runners on it? No. If you're going in, you need to go in properly. I think you need to go in. You can start small by all means, absolutely start small, but I think you have to go all in because a bad digital experience or the app, it's just deleted, it's over. It's so hard to get people back. And I think that would be my third piece of advice. And finally, the takeaway I have from events like this is digital has given us information in bucket loads. We are building data centers all over the world, hosting this information. Kingspan actually builds a lot of them. But the information that's there to learn, conferences like today, LinkedIn, like I would follow, like where do I learn, whether it's a small business or a big business, I'd follow people like the CDOs of IKEA, for example, and just see what are they talking about, what are they doing, and can we learn from either the mistakes or for what's going well for them. And that piece of continual learning, long gone are the encyclopedia and the rule books. You're now kind of, the micro learning is allowing for a whole raft of new opportunities.
Brilliant, Louise. I mean, they're all really practical tips indeed. Just in case anybody doesn't know who a CDO is, it's the Chief Digital Officer.
There
so
you go.
The Louise of IKEA, basically, it's who we're talking about. Elaine, you were here for Caroline's conversation this morning, and particularly afterwards, again, there when we asked people what they wanted, another thing that came up was tax and HR advice and so on. And Caroline also spoke about, in the words of Jim Collins, like getting people on the bus. By the way, Jim Collins and another co-author wrote the book Good to Great. That's where she was quoting from. It's an audiobook that I've listened to numerous times. So Elaine, like, what do you do to attract talent to go with you, to really get that buy-in, to kind of grab the hearts and minds so that they will go the distance? I mean, is it flexibility, is it vision? As Caroline says, is it culture that eats strategy for breakfast? What's your thoughts on this?
I actually, a lot of the points that Caroline raised today resonated heavily with me. I think, for me personally, I invest a significant amount of time in hiring. I personally interview everyone, and I hire talent with the can-do attitude, Susan. And yes, I think for most of the roles, you can train for skill. I think there's some exceptions to the likes of that, and that's probably for me in the software development side. In terms of skills and behaviors, I place a lot of emphasis around resilience, agility, and the ability to be at ease with change management. I set expectations from the outset. In terms of, like, I sit down very, very transparent about what the journey is going to be like, as in, here's the joys that you're going to experience in a startup, scale up, but also here's the pain. It's not for everybody. And Eugene mentioned it a little bit earlier on there in the comments, the fact that you could go from a multinational, like, you know, I've worked in multinational startups, and they're very, very different environments. So very, you know, a lack of structure, processes, procedures is frustrating for some. So setting the scene there, and then in terms of getting them on the journey, getting them on the bus, talking about the future plan and the role and the impact that they can have. You walk into a multinational organization, you start working in the morning, and your ability to have an impact just isn't ever at the scale that it would be in a startup arena. So that's big for me. I think, you know, if you're in a startup as well, and particularly if you're a little bit bigger like us, we have a multinational presence. So I've got an executive team sitting in Australia and New York. I put the team out, you know, for recognition. I give them the platform, and I'm very clear as into, well, here's the company values, but also here's the local values, here's how they resonate for us. So the team in Sligo know that they now have garnered a reputation of being recognized by their peers and leadership globally as a team that produces quality work, but with a very, very positive outlook. And it means, you know, I suppose our approach is paying off, because there's a lot of pride in what we do, the projects that we deliver, but we've fostered such a collaborative spirit is that everybody wants to work with us. And just talking about that, paying homage to it on a day-to-day basis, and, you know, bringing in the team, championing them, giving them that platform to showcase themselves, and talking about the lessons learned. You know, we talked a little bit earlier on about the risks and the fact that, you know, Caroline says, acknowledge it as long as, the failures, you know, when things go awry, acknowledge it, and, you know, show it as lessons learned. There's huge maturity on that. And again, that, you know, resonates very, very powerfully elsewhere when people look in and want to work with you, be it customers or teams elsewhere around the globe.
I think that is really important. All right, Elaine. And the fact, you know, what stands out to me there is that you say be transparent about the journey, is that there will be a lot of highs and there can be lows, there certainly can be, and actually just being honest about that up front. I'm going to go to David next. Before I do, I just want to shout out again to a couple of people here who are tweeting in. The II.com said, great session ongoing, inspiring to hear local people leading businesses to scale. The Innovation Centre in Sligo picks up on your point there earlier on, Elaine. Don't see barriers to setting up in Sligo. And then we also have West Bic, who is talking about that there's a really insightful conference going on at the moment, and GMIT Hubs is great discussion and insights from some local entrepreneurs this morning in the West and the Northwest. David, let's go to you now. And you know, you told us there about going from one to IPO, right? And we truly wish you the very best, as I say, and it'll be interesting to follow that journey with you. Sure. But a lot of people there mentioned, when we asked them what they need, they said funding. The possibilities to people, you know, based on the numbers that we've seen here, could be CSF, could be HPS, Competitive Start Fund. I know it can be frustrating people use acronyms. HPSU is High Potential Startup. There's the New Frontiers programs, and I'm going to share some details with you, with everybody here today about those. Did you participate in any of those? Like, were they helpful in getting you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so we actually went through every available fund that Enterprise Ireland had. I think we're the poster child for Enterprise Ireland at one stage, because it was literally like clockwork. Year by year, we go through New Frontiers, then CSF, then HPSU, and then through to acquisition in about 3.5 years. So we ticked all the boxes there. They were very helpful, and at various stages depending on where we were. So New Frontiers, as an example, was a great step because I had a technical background, I had technical knowledge and domain knowledge, but I didn't have any knowledge around sales, marketing, general business, you know, any of those components. So at that stage, New Frontiers was a great stepping stone to at least understand some of the basics. When it came to CSF, CSF was great because it gave us the money to hire our first employee. So that was a big step, and that was something that, as a person on your own running a business, the steps taking on one person is almost the same as taking on 10 people. You're taking on, as we heard in the HR demo from Caroline, there's so many things you have to do, whether it's one person or 10, you still have to go through all of the legal obligations, your employee handbook. So it's, once you get to that first employee, that was the big one for us, and CSF helped us get there. And it also started to give us some credibility as well. And that's one thing we found a lot with all of the Enterprise Ireland backing was when we were selling to, most of our customers from the US from the beginning, having Enterprise Ireland backing gave us a lot of credibility before we had a lot of customers to give us that credibility. So that was really helpful. And then onto HBSU, again, the same thing. We had US investors fairly soon after we started the company. And the fact that we had HBSU investment from Enterprise Ireland gave our US investors a lot of confidence because, we're dealing with people that were, 6,000 miles away that were investing in the company. They didn't know us that well, but because Enterprise Ireland were backing us, it gave us a lot of credibility and gave them some comfort in who they were backing. So from that perspective, it was very helpful. But really, for me, all of that, the funding, all of the consulting work we did at the early stages was to build a SaaS product that could effectively make money when I was sleeping.
Can I just actually just interrupt there, David? Generally, when we hear the term consulting, there's a connotation there that it's not very scalable unless you're right up with the professional services, the big four and so on like that.
Yeah.
I mentioned there about, that scale also needs business model engineering to some degree. How did you pivot from possibly a non-scalable, and I'm making that assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, non-scalable consultancy into scalable scale?
Yeah, and the consultancy, you're right, wasn't very scalable, and I never really thought that it would be. It did scale to a certain degree. And there was two things. One was I had a fairly specialized skill, which meant it allowed us to work for the top companies in the world in terms of the projects we're bringing in. So that was quite helpful. This was early in the cloud life cycle as well. So there wasn't a lot of people there with that skill set, and that meant we could capitalize on that. We had a very good partnership with the college in Letterkenny. So with LYT, we had a great partnership. We took a lot of students on, we would train them up. And the way we skilled was having a lot of the students then starting to do the consulting work. So I would be customer facing in the US, meeting customers, taking on the projects. As an example, anyone who's familiar with Amazon Web Services, who are Amazon, the biggest cloud provider in the world, a lot of their early coursework that they did was actually written by us in Letterkenny. So I would meet companies in Dublin, the US. We'd put together the coursework for Amazon, and was actually being written by the students in LYT who were doing summer placements. So that's how we helped scale the consulting business enough to provide the revenue to then support actually building the SaaS product that got us to where we are today.
Do you know what I mean, David? Just the relationship to have with a university, it is often, again, it's a missing secret weapon from so many ways. And the fact that you had that relationship and built it, but brought those opportunities back in, because I can imagine the CVs of the people who were working there to say we were writing code for Amazon, before we ever graduated is really, really important for sure. Was there an extra point you want to speak?
And that's one of the reasons I started the company as well in the West was because I wanted to build a high-tech global company and be the top company in the world in what we did, but do so from the west of Ireland. And having grown up in the West, you always had to go to Dublin, you had to go to Galway or London or wherever it was. And I know there was a lot of people who work for us here were great employees, but they had families here. They couldn't just leave and go to Dublin and start working there. Now it's changed, obviously, with COVID. People have far more ability to work from everywhere. But 6-7 years ago, there just wasn't a huge amount of high tech work, and I felt you should be able to, with the internet, work from anywhere. You should be able to have a high tech job, work for people in Australia or America in the same way as if you're working for somebody in Galway or Dublin.
Yeah, I mean, you were before your time in that case. We've all caught up with you there, David. I can tell you. Paul, I'm going to go to you next, please, because you mentioned there you're on your third startup. You've also worked in a very large company, and people often say big companies want to think and act like small companies, and vice versa. But you've stood on both sides. What's your experience of that, and what can we learn maybe from the multinational environment that can help a startup to scale?
I guess I should say my first startup was a spectacular failure. Probably a lot to do with age and not enough money leaving college. But I think for me, the word scale changed over time. When I started the Mayo subsidiary of Linebridge in 1998, I think the question about could we scale meant could we attract enough of the right people locally, to meet the demand that we were building for the business from a selling perspective. And so, we started literally from a hole in the ground and built a business and probably had about 170 people in Ballina by the early 2000s. So that was the kind of first part of the scale question. Could we do that and fulfill a local mandate? And I think after that, we started to think about, well, if we're going to continue to grow long term, the framing of the question changed from, people to countries. And I think you touched on this earlier today, Susan. And then the question became, well, can we build teams of people across markets? So we started to think about, could we do this in India? Could we do this in China? And then we started thinking about regionally in the Americas and in Asia. So that became the question, could we scale the business model as opposed to the business? And so that meant a reinvention of a lot of things we were doing locally here in Mayo, but applying them, in a global context. And so we did that quite well, and we ended up serving, about 46 to 47,000 customers globally by the end of that phase. And then I suppose the third definition, for me was, taking over the selling side of the business. Could we build $100 million business, across 100 markets? And, could we build, a remote workforce of about 15,000 people to do it? So that was the third part of answering the scale question, from Mayo, but really taking it in a global context. So that for me was the journey for the multinational definition of scale, in my particular context. Now as a startup, you're going right back to the start. So the meaning is completely different. And scale here really means, is the problem we're solving as a startup big enough, interesting enough and innovative enough to attract, a large number of customers, or in our case, a small number of very large customers. And so scaling in that context is really about building your business to attract the next round of growth. I think David, will appreciate, the journey. We're a HPSU. We did a lot of work with the GMIT here in Castlebar, just in terms of developing supports, but all of that fed into what we're doing now. And so, I suppose the definition of scale has changed quite substantially. As you go to a small business, you're thinking scale is about survival, but it's survival to the next stage of your business. And so I think for us, as we go through, the seed round, A, B, and so on, it's about, I think the end of this journey will be the start of the journey I had before I started the business, where you're really thinking about global scale in a country context. As well as people and revenue and so on. So the word really does change depending on your context. But for me, it was exciting building a global business, but it's, I think Louise and Elaine alluded to it. The technology we have now is all built on the things we were doing over the past 20 years. The stuff we're doing is absolutely phenomenal in terms of AI, machine learning from Mayo, but we needed the infrastructure to be able to do it. So our business wouldn't have been possible until about 5 years ago. So that's the exciting part. But scale, I think the story is now, as a small business, it's about survival. And that's really where the focus is. So they're my views of scale and how they change over time.
Can I ask you, Paul, you said, is the problem worth solving, big enough, innovative enough, and you had another word?
I suppose interesting enough.
Interesting enough. Do you mean interesting for you as the founder, or interesting for the client, or both? Interesting
for the customers.
Okay.
So I think for us, the business we have now at PropTix, we're improving the experience and local relevance of digital products. And we're doing that with a combination of in-country domain experts, data, and machine learning. And so what we're really enabling is companies that are on the digital journey to make products and services relevant. And that's not a trivial undertaking. That's actually quite difficult, but you have to be all in. And so we're working with companies who are absolutely all in on the data side, on the domain expertise side, and the in-market side, which is where our experience lies, to help them, shorten the time for customers to buy, really. It's a big part of it. So that's what I mean by interesting enough, Susan. It's got to be, yes, it's a problem, but is it an interesting one for us to engage with, say, a small startup like ourselves? We're just about 12 or 13 people at this stage. And so you really have to have an outsized solution to a very difficult problem for them to be interested in it, because otherwise they'd probably consider doing it themselves or doing it with somebody else.
Particularly, you know, when Louise says so much technology is accessible, like I wasn't aware of that Airbnb's tech, for example, that most of it, any of us could have had access on. And just as you were saying about going all in, I see Louise nodding and smiling involuntarily along the way. Louise, I'm going to go to you again, but before I do, I just want to read out a couple of comments here. Hearing these local entrepreneurs and business people is just wonderful. So many interesting insights, and also great to see people in multinationals companies looking at setting up their business in the West and in the North. Also, Ryan says, very wonderful to hear about the step-by-step benefits of New Frontiers, CSF, again, that is competitive start funding, and HPSU, which is high potential startup programs, as well as scaling in the Northwest. Very helpful. Thank you. In addition here as well, Gráinne McCarthy says, inspiring on Twitter, inspiring conversation, and very interested to hear about consultancy scalability and the links with the university. And New Frontiers says, the Cloud Ranger past participant on EI New Frontiers was a great help in taking the next step. And IT, Sligo Innovate and CoLab were delighted to be part of that journey. So keep on tweeting and talking to us. We're only delighted to hear from you. Louise, since we have used Slack, I'd say I heard about it at a conference about 7 years ago, and we completely eliminated in-person email within the company. We replaced it with Slack. In January of this year, I was fortunate to MC a conference in digital transformation for GMIT. And from that, I realized that our project management software wasn't up to as date as much as we could. And we moved from Trello to ClickUp, and with really, really great, to take Paul's word, outsized benefits from there. What technologies could you suggest to people that, you know, can help people in simply remote working in whatever way possible, in whatever sector possible? Could you suggest to our audience today, either from your own perspective at Kingspan, or maybe just looking out, having surveyed the market?
Yeah, there's a few there, Susan, and it was lovely to see you using Mentimeter, the Mentimeter. I would say that's absolutely amazing. Look at all the info you were able to gather in probably 3 minutes. And so visual and everything. So that would be definitely one. And all the big consultants, Deloitte, the big four, they all use that tool. So that's one. Another one that I personally love is called Mural, MURAL.co, and it's a digital workspace. So I find when we're running workshops, say there could be 30 of us on a workshop, that can be so incredibly difficult to manage without some sort of tool. You'll just all be fighting over airtime, basically. So the digital workspace, it allows you to create nice little areas, and people can come in and do their own piece and look at it and take it away with them and make PDFs. And Miro is another one. So Miro and Mural would be quite similar. They'd be both kind of described as digital workspaces or collaboration workshopping tools. Like to take you into a physical environment, you'd be back to your old whiteboards and the likes of what's behind me. And it's to create that environment, which is actually really important in terms of getting things down on paper. You could find yourself on calls like this for hours and nothing down on paper. So I think they work quite well. Slack, of course, as you mentioned, and there seems to be enormous investment going into that as a technology at the moment. So I think we're only going to see more and more. Of course, you have Zoom. Zoom probably is a new word now that has many uses, but Zoom and Microsoft Teams are investing heavily in their piece as well. And one I use that helps the team know where they are with everything is a tool called Jira. I'm not sure if others here use that, but we would use it with the big consultancy houses or one or two people myself. We absolutely love it. And it'll give you diagrams, it'll give you colors to show you, you know, in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, if this work isn't done. It really allows for, I suppose, the word you used earlier there, Susan, agile working. And it's really adopting those tools that are there into your company. And none of these are expensive. Otherwise, I think managing is really hard.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And you know, when Caroline was there talking about celebrating the wins and everything, it is, you know, it is important to do that. Tell me, Louise, while we have you in the context of, you know, being in a company where there is, as you say, like 5 billion worth of revenue, in terms of that kind of Q&A with people in management, you know the way some CEOs of like tens of thousands of employees have sessions where you can just drop in and ask them. I think Mark Zuckerberg does this every Friday kind of thing. What's your thoughts on that kind of open mic, having a conversation, that live conversation? I mean, is that easier to do with these tools? Do you do them? What do you think? Or just
Yeah, it's
internal?
interesting you asked me that. Like amongst our own team, so the 30 of us, we do actually the Q&A on every Friday. We do it for an hour and a half, and it absolutely flies because we use the mural and those kind of things. So before you know it, people are saying, "Oh, it's over." I'm a huge believer. Like we had a conference in Facebook about 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw that unfold when I was there, and I saw everyone watching the screen, and I thought, wow, okay, is everybody in our organization able to embrace that kind of openness? Absolutely not. I think it's a cultural thing to open yourself and expose yourself like that, and not every business leader would like that. They prefer to take difficult conversations offline and not have it in that type of environment. But it depends again on the size of your company, I think, and HR, a lot of the stuff Caroline talked about earlier there in terms of grievances, some of those things, could be laundry being washed out in front of everyone, which mightn't be appropriate. But I think if you do set kind of rules of engagement around these are times when we're going to talk about innovation or what sustainability or growth or whatever maybe you're trying to solve, that they're absolutely amazing. And something like this Zoom and mural, and you don't need, and a poll maybe like Minty that you had there, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'd be a huge fan of that type of.
And just the the willingness to do it and just run it. And I suppose you don't need Facebook's number of employees to do that. That kind of having an open conversation can be very useful. Elaine, one of the things that the Irish are said to be very good at is networking. I mean, David there is talking about engaging with US customers, say from the get-go. Paul there was talking about dealing with this or looking at business models and can they be scaled all over. I mean, your own story or your own company's story as well has quite the international focus. And a lot of people on Mentimeter there said that they felt that scale was a more of a geographical or a global reach. What are your thoughts on, developing social capital, developing networks? How good are we at it, and where do we fall down?
Yeah, I think it's actually our secret weapon, Susan, and we should be touting it more on a national and international stage. I just saw your poll there in terms of some of the asks that came in or where people need assistance on, and mentoring is one that resonated with me, and I'm going, why don't we actually use our network and capabilities to get out there and ask more for ourselves? And I think that we don't necessarily view networking in that capacity as in, hey, I really need assistance with this. I think people feel it's okay to say, well, new market entry or tax advice, etc. But sometimes it can be about some of the fundamentals to grow. So don't be afraid to use it for self-serving arenas as well, or benefits. For me, listen, Live Tiles wouldn't be in Ireland today if the IDA, Sligo, the IT in Sligo, the business centre, a local Chamber of Commerce, members of Tech Northwest, and the business community as a whole, if they didn't come together and offer to provide guidance, support, and really showcase the Céad Míle Fáilte, if you like, to the co-founders, it just wouldn't have happened. So there's so much in terms of those intangibles, but for somebody to be able to put out a call, be it the IDA, and say, these are coming to town, can you come together, offer your time? And people just drop everything. But it wasn't just there and then, it's on an ongoing basis, and we've been able to connect with so many people and really start driving into different markets and get other opportunities and attract different skill sets and build a brand, if you like, which was absolutely unknown of. But Susan, for me, I work with different cultures on a day-to-day basis, and with my responsibilities across EMEA, I work with the Danes and the Swiss and many other cultures, and they look at us in awe the way we can literally say, well, I'll pick up the phone and get somebody to help me solve that. And it's not necessarily, 50% of the time it could be somebody outside the company and somebody asking somebody else. So the network is so powerful, and we just need to use it more.
And just because I also know as well, Elaine, that you do a lot of work with AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce. How do you think that specific relationship, obviously there's been a lot of change both sides of the Atlantic, and it's really relevant at the moment around how that conversation is happening with the triangle of the UK and so on. Do you feel that our strength, that the relationship that we have with the US continues to grow? Do you think that will continue to offer opportunities to people who are here today as well as beyond?
Yeah, I do. I sit on the board of the American Chamber of Commerce, and it's been really, really fruitful for me in my role to be able to grow. But you need to be able to, particularly when you're on an international stage, be able to set your stall out. And yes, tax comes into play, and it's pretty topical at the moment. But it's not just the only I suppose, show in town for us in terms of attracting more inward investment, but also showcasing and getting more of a footprint on the ground for Irish companies in the US. So I think we're always working, reinventing, but at the same time knowing what the core value is. And we talked about, and Caroline touched on it in terms of talent wanting to come and work in Ireland. So we need to continue making ourselves as attractive as possible. And that's not always around tax. That's that human approach that we have, that Céad Míle Fáilte wearing the green jersey as we do so well, and making a great place to work, thrive and grow in, and coming to Ireland, not just for a job, but a career.
The Céad Míle Fáilte is something you've mentioned a number of times, Elaine. And of course, David, as we go to you now, I mean, you started off almost kind of from day zero interacting with the US. So I could imagine that you've probably felt the reverse benefits of that. But one of the things that you mentioned there is, after you went through all of the various different CSF and HBSU and all those various different elements, is that you got to acquisition pretty quickly. Now, lots of people, when they're discussing scale here, like we heard what their definition of it was, is that was kind of at the start of the scale journey. Can I now just hear from you, what was it like at the acquisition stage of the journey? Did it arise from years and years and years of relationships? Was it a contentious time? Did you have your eye on that ball before you started?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. If I could just to step back to the networking piece, that's incredibly important. And for me, one of the reasons we were successful was because of networking. The best opportunity I got was I tweeted the CEO of a company in California on kind of day one and asked for his help. And he agreed. We went online, we started meeting, and we still work together, 5 years later at this stage. So be brave and talk to as many people, and don't be afraid to reach out. People are really helpful. So that's incredibly important as you start the business. When it came to acquisition, I think Paul talked about a lot of these things already. You need to be solving a problem that's a scalable problem. But, it needs to be a problem that's attractive to someone to acquire you. And they're going to acquire you for a particular reason, either to get into a new market, to strategically add to an offering that they have, which was really what happened for us. But the problem needs to be one that's a global problem with enough customers out there, either, as Paul said, very large customers willing to pay a lot, or a number of small customers willing to pay a lot, or a lot of customers willing to pay a small amount. And for us, this was a brand new market. We had, from day one, designed everything we did to be scalable, because we didn't have the people resources to put behind a product. So it had to be entirely automated. We had to, for me, being able to go to sleep at night and come in the morning and see that we'd, sold software to people in Australia without any interaction. That's what made our product scalable. So, by the time we were acquired, we had customers in maybe 32 countries, but still only had 6 members of staff at the time. Because of that automation and the potential for scale. We didn't really even have the scale at that stage, but we demonstrated that we could scale very well if the right resources were put behind us, which is what's happened since then. So from a scale perspective, I think demonstrating that there was a big enough market, having the automation in place, using all the things that Louise had talked about to make sure that your product is going to, it's entirely digital journey for the customer, something that can be easily automated, and as much as possible, you can show that if it's now working for 10 customers or 100 customers, it could easily work for 10,000 in the exact same way. And that's what we were able to demonstrate, and that's what made us attractive from an acquisition perspective. And that really is that's a universal. I mean, that'll translate to any country in the world.
Did you seek that out? I know obviously the tweet with CEO, but was that the intention? Did you start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say?
I suppose, yes, I mean, the dream would have always been to be acquired, but not something that we actively worked towards. I figured if we made the business attractive enough, we would be acquired anyway. You know, as to say, you don't sell a business, you're bought. And you know, in the beginning, I would have thought that there's hundreds of companies in the world who would acquire us. And in reality, you know, when it actually came down to it, there was probably only 10 that really we were a good fit for, that we would have liked to have joined. But also we're in that business, and that we would have been a great strategic fit for. And I didn't realize that until such time as the acquisition happened. So if I tried to engineer that at the very start, we probably could have ended up in a vastly different place, and probably made a lot of mistakes trying to, you know, put ourselves in to be acquired by a particular set of companies. Really making the business scalable and a solid, you know, I think Louise mentioned kind of business 101. You know, having your business in a solid place with very good financials, very good fundamentals, and the ability to solve a global problem, you'll be attractive to a company to be acquired. So if those things are in place, you know, that's what we did, and eventually companies came looking for us, and they literally found us through Google.
It's interesting there that you say you basically set up the business to be scalable, which being open-minded to being bought, and then, you know, serendipity and science possibly came together to arrive at that outcome. Paul, what David says there is quite thoughtful. It's quite streamlined, and yet, you know, we've heard you say before, not today, but in other arenas, we've heard you talk about being hopelessly global and mindlessly local. Now, I don't want to repeat the theme today because I'll confuse people when I put all of those words together, but could you share your thoughts on that? I mean, given the fact of what we've just heard from David there, who went straight for the US, knew what he was doing, was open-minded to what happened along the way, but hopelessly global and mindlessly local. Tell us what that means.
I suppose I better give Keith Weed, who was the chief marketing officer for Unilever, credit for a version of that quote, because he comes at this from a global perspective. I changed it to this from a local business perspective. And if I may use it in the context of PerOptics to illustrate what I'm saying, Susan, you know, one of the key factors for our business is that we have to operate globally from day one. So we've built the infrastructure to enable us to do that, because our customers expect their, you know, production partners to be able to operate on a global basis. Now, the risk is, you know, for us as a very small business, is as we build capacity in 20 countries, it's modest, but as David said, we have to demonstrate the capability to do it quite quickly. So automation, you know, is a key part of that. But the risk that you run in trying to become hopelessly global is to say, well, if we build presence in all of these countries, then we're going to make ourselves more attractive to our customers in terms of doing business with us. And that's a huge risk that, you know, particularly small companies run, you know, from a cash management perspective, from a stretch perspective, you know, to be able to cope with all of that. And so it's very attractive when you think about growth to say, well, let's do it globally. And your focus then shifts maybe to the wrong place at the wrong time. Because you forget what it is you're trying to do, you know, with a smaller team. So I think for us, you know, the way we think about it is we use it to think about risk. You know, are we doing the right thing in expanding in these markets at this time for the business? Because we know that if you try to do it too quickly, you know, you put the business in jeopardy. Now, if I was to reverse it and thinking about mindlessly local, you know, and maybe again using an example, we're working with a small business, a relatively small business in the European side, and they have a really interesting idea about shortening the time it takes people to buy a second-hand car, and I won't labor this, but they hadn't thought about how their business could expand outside of their local market until we showed them that it was possible to actually do this at a relatively cheap cost, relatively quickly, to quite a number of countries in Europe. But the point is they were so focused on their local market, they couldn't conceive of their business expanding. And that's, I think, what I talk about, you know, mindlessly local. They really couldn't see outside their context as they started to think about growth. So for us, it's a phrase I probably use to think about risk. And that's how we think about it for our own business. You know, we are working with, you know, large global companies, and so they will push you in directions that may not be good for the business in terms of global expansion. But at the same time, you know, if we keep too narrowly focused locally, we won't grow and we won't become, you know, to David's point, properly scalable and attractive, to a larger set of customers. So if I was to sum it up, Susan, it's about risk. It's how we think about it, and from a startup perspective, that's the way, that's the easiest way for us to ask ourselves the hard questions.
Paul, though, is it that, the hungry entrepreneur who's full of energy and full of enthusiasm, and as Lane says, sees no barriers, doesn't think about risk. We just want to go and do and, get on with it. Do you find that putting those types of risk questions to a good entrepreneur is a very healthy, though sometimes frustrating to the person in question, but it's a very healthy thing to do?
It's a good way to get them to think about where they want to go next and why. Because all entrepreneurs starting off want to boil the ocean, and sometimes they have to realize that's just not possible. So you don't want to be putting barriers in front of people. You want to encourage them. You want to say, look, if we can do this from Mayo, it's possible for you to do this as well. You can build a global business. It is doable, and it is possible. So you've got to believe in the possible, but you have to frame it with questions that get you to think about risk in that context of an entrepreneur trying to do everything. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about context and how you frame the question. Look, for us, it's just a very good way for us to every now and again calibrate what we're doing and say, look, are we doing the right thing here by going to this next market just because we think there might be something there? And more often than not, we'll just say, you know what, let's put our resources somewhere else. And so that's how we approach it.
Yeah, because I think, the older I've gotten, and I'm still very young, just saying, but the older I've gotten, the more important those questions are. Okay, couple of things there, and then a couple of things I'm going to bring in there from the audience, and then I'm going to go to each of you for the rapid fire round of 1 minute about why you feel your part of the West or the Northwest, and maybe not just your part, but why the West and the Northwest is a great place to scale a business. Eugene says, Elaine's point is so pertinent, be it our cultural personality or just gift of the gab, it's a real differentiating quality we have, especially in this era of communication and collaboration. Sharon Boyle then says on Twitter, fantastic suggestions from Louise Foodie about Kingspan on applications businesses can use to collaborate. Miro is my personal favorite for collaborative hybrid working, and excellent event, she says, on hybrid working. GMIT iHub says on Twitter, I could listen to these speakers all day. Thank you to them all for participating. Great insights for us all. Delighted they are here in the West and Northwest. As always, Susan Hayes is always everything in control. Great MC. Now, I had started reading that bit before I realized at the end of it was, you're very kind, GMIT. Personally, I would love to MC all day long for sure. I also see, thanks, David, you've been quite active there in the chat. People have been putting questions to you there as well. So that's great that we've had this from you all. So definitely the interaction has continued. Can I just go quickly around the room? I'm going to start this time with the men and I'll finish with the women. West, Northwest, a place to grow, to grow or scale your business in this hybrid working world. David, why the Northwest? Why Donegal?
Yeah, it's home. It's where my family is, and I love the place. So for me, that's kind of number one, and then the second love is IT. So if I'm going to grow a company, I'm going to do it from here. I spend enough time traveling. It's easy to get on a plane and be anywhere in the world within 24 hours. So you don't necessarily need to live anywhere else to do this. So yeah, I don't see why not. So if not, why not? Great. Okay, Paul.
I think my experience in Mayo in particular, maybe 20 years ago, was it's impossible. I heard that a lot. And so there was a lot of fun in figuring out how to make that possible. So I think, being older and wiser, the reason to do it again is just, it sounds trite, but it's really the talent, the quality of people, all of the reasons, that I think Elaine alluded to earlier, all the reasons why it makes most sense. You're competing not against other businesses, you're competing with other families. And that's a lot more fun, because if you make it attractive on that dimension, then you really do win in terms of commitment, and in terms of how you can grow your business. And for that reason, it's why we decided to do this here, and not in Dublin or even in the US, where it was something we were seriously considering. So for us, it's the key reason.
Okay, brilliant. Louise? Well, Louise, just to put in context, the HQ is in Cavan, you're in Galway. Have you grown up now in Claremorris?
And I guess I'm just back really integrating back into life in the West after over 15 years away. And to be able to have made that transition so seamlessly, it's kind of incredible. To think of where my career started, and like to talk to anybody what was involved in, like I would have jumped on a plane in Toronto to Vancouver for a 2-hour meeting and back the same day. It's crazy when you look back at that, and I know lots of you have given examples of that. But to be here and networks that are around, like as I talked earlier, okay, I might have used the CDO of IKEA, but lots of little nuggets there today, and I have Paul's one about going all in, because that's what I'm prophesizing the whole time in terms of digitalization. So networks are everywhere, so you tap into them and they're here. And as I think I said in my opening, there's just a feeling of living here that when people ask, I just can't describe it. It's just a feeling.
Wonderful, Louise. Thank you. Do you know what you're all reminded me of before I go to Elaine? This is almost like what Caroline said about getting, your staff to give the testimonials about what life is really like here. This is actually what it's like only for a region. And Elaine, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, listen, it's the local business and academia ecosystem. It's just something to behold in the Northwest. They cheer you on in terms of your successes and also prop you up when you're learning the hard lessons. And people in Sligo have just been so invested in our success. And I joined to spur on lifetiles, but a lot of other items as well, such as encouraging offshoots, encouraging young people into tech, and showcasing that a regional location can compete on an international stage. And I think we're well on our way in that journey.
You'd inspire a nation. In fact, you already have. And on that note, as I bring proceedings to a close, I'm just going to share what I've learned from the four of you today. Start off with Louise. She said most tech that you need is already accessible. She said it's important to map out how your customers interact with you and then to invest your money and time accordingly. She said, remember, there's a human at the center of every transaction, and to use tech to make those relationships more sticky. In addition, she recommended mural.co, Jira, Slack, Zoom, Teams, and a 90-minute Q&A on a Friday. Then Elaine says, put a lot of time into hiring. She said, set expectations from the outset and be transparent about the journey. She said, it's important to focus on both the highs and the lows that will happen, but particularly the USP of a startup can be to focus on the role and the impact that you can have in a company. She said, don't just share the company values, but the local values as well. Networking is our secret weapon, that the Irish way of doing things is the envy of other cultures. David then said, taking on one employee is like taking on 10. He said, you need the employee handbook, you need everything else in place, but that's the big one. He said the HBSU investment from EI gave credibility when attracting US investors. He said the consultancy that he built fitted a certain niche, but particularly the relationship with NYIT was a real game changer for them. He said you need to demonstrate the scalable aspect of your business so that you're attractive to somebody who is seeking to acquire. And a particular point he said is that you don't sell a company, you're bought. Then Paul says, he said the question of scaling a multinational is, can we build teams of people across markets? But then he said, can we scale the business model as distinct from just the business? He said, is the problem worth solving? From the point of view, is it big enough? Is it interesting enough? And is it innovative enough? He said, hopelessly global and mindlessly local refers to risk. And what you need to do is that, he said, for those of you who might think, well, if we can showcase that we can do business around the world, then that will make us more attractive, but it's a very, very risky strategy. He said, bear in mind, at the end of the day, it's about the business and it's about people and it's about the ambition to take it further than that. And all four of you have made the whole lot of us want to take our cars, vans and incubation centres and head west. So on that note, I'm going to thank each one of the four of you for being here. I really want to thank GMIT, LYIT and Sligo IT and the 4 incubation centres there for supporting this event. Big thank you massively to Enterprise Ireland as well for participating and giving sponsorship to today. Later on, I'm going to head on over to LinkedIn and record a summary of all of the events. It has to be under 10 minutes to put a video on LinkedIn Live. So anyone that wants to connect with me there on LinkedIn, you'll see that summary. I'll be tagging all the speakers and everything as well. So if you're connected with them, you'll see it also. Personally, I want to say a huge thank you to Maria Staunton and to Jeanette Gillen. You've seen both of them there have been posting on the chat. They have been really, really brilliant. They've been so supportive. We have a WhatsApp group that's been buzzing between us all over the past while. Also, I want to say thank you to Turlock, and I want to say thank you to Patsy as well, who've also been there right across the journey. Most of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who has been part of today interacting on Twitter, Q&A, chat, as well as on Mentimeter. You're the reason we're all here. And please take away something from today and implement it so that you truly can scale your business in this hybrid working world, globally growing and working locally. That is what it's all about. Thank you all. Have every best wish for the rest of your week. And thank you again to everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks,
Thanks very much,
everyone.
Susan. Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.